Welcome to the Vegan Pulse, the podcast that brings you stories of compassionate individuals from around the globe as they share their journeys into veganism and their current efforts to promote this ethical lifestyle. I am your host, Nancy Arenas, and today my guest is Martin Smedjeback. Martin has worked as a full-time peace, animal rights, and climate activist and educator for the last 20 years. He is the chairperson of Safe Movement Sweden. For the last 8 years, he has been working with his crowdfunded project, A Year for the Animals. Martin holds presentations, facilitates workshops, does open rescues of animals, occasionally spends time in prison, campaigns for animal rights and the climate, takes photos and videos. He holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Lund in Sweden. Let me introduce him to you. Hi, Martin. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Good to be here, Nancy.
Oh, I am so honored to have you here on the Vegan Pulse. I love to get people from everywhere sharing their journeys. So let's talk about your journey into veganism.
All right. Yeah, my journey began about, when was it? 24 years ago, and into animal rights. And that was when I read the book Animal Liberation by philosopher Peter Singer. Actually, I picked it up in a library before that, but then I decided not to read it the first time. And the reason was I still live with my parents, and I thought, if I'm going to read this book, I'm going to turn vegetarian. And that seemed like a hassle, because then I had to cook my own food. So actually, I didn't read it until I moved out. But then I became vegetarian. Today, I'm asking myself, why didn't I go vegan? Because they had all the arguments for going vegan in the book. But that seemed too much for me at that time, too extreme. I didn't know any vegans. So it took me about 7 years for me to go vegan. So I've been now vegan for about 17 years now. Yeah.
Awesome. So it's funny that you say that you picked up the book, you put it back, you didn't read it because you knew what was going to happen after you read it.
Yeah. And I see this so many times when I say I'm into animal rights, and some say, oh, don't tell me, I don't want to know, because they know how terrible it is with factory farms. But so many people don't know. But I recognize that in my own history. Yeah.
I did too, because, when I was younger, like 4 or 5 decades ago, another 3 lifetimes ago, that's exactly it. When somebody would say something, I'd go, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to hear it. Because I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to hear that and then try to eat my food, because I know that wouldn't have gone right. So,
and one can understand that, because it's a terrible thing to take into your life, right? Because then you have to deal with the suffering, and even if you become vegan, it's still there, and you have to struggle with it. But on the other hand, of course, it's good, because you can find meaning in struggling for something that you believe in. And I think we are on the right track, at least.
Yes, and sharing that kind of a thing, like you didn't do the book because you knew you were going to go vegetarian. Myself, no, I don't want to hear it, because that's what people do. But then, I myself, I'm so sorry that I didn't listen back then, and and go vegan back then, and waited all this time. So
exactly, yeah.
So now let's talk. You are with the Safe Movement in Sweden.
Yeah.
And as such, I know that I've read that, well, first of all, you're an animal activist, a climate activist. I guess in veganism, that encompasses everything. But that you also have done live animal rescues and occasionally have been jailed.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So let's talk about those kinds of things that you have done.
All right. You could say that my activism began really in the peace movement. So I actually worked as staff in a peace organization for 7 years. And then I learned about nonviolence and about the different movements, important movements like the civil rights movements, of course, the suffragettes and other important movements in history, and of course still valid and still the issues we keep struggling for today. And then I felt I had to do something with my knowledge, so I got into activism on Swedish weapons export. Maybe you wouldn't believe it, but Sweden is a big exporter of weapons, actually, still today, unfortunately. So that's how I began with civil disobedience and actually going into weapons factories and hammering on weapons and being open with it and calling the police when we're ready and so on, like some kind of resistance against how Sweden contributed and still contributes to war today. So that earned me the first time in prison, not so long in prison, a few months each. But then after that, I became more active in the animal rights movement after a while. And yeah, first doing some lectures. I did lectures on the work of Professor Melanie Joy, who your viewers might be familiar with, who talks about why we love dogs, eat cows and eat pigs and wear cows.
Right.
So I did that for some time, but then I figured I want to do this full time. So I was thinking, how can you do that? There isn't a lot of employment in the animal rights movement in Sweden, and I guess not in many countries at all. So I figured, and I got some inspiration from friends that had done something similar before. Why don't I ask for people to contribute to my work for a year and see how it goes, see if I can get donations so I can get enough so I can eat, I can have for my rent and so on. And so I called that A Year for the Animals. And that went well. I got all the money I needed. I lived quite cheaply in the community, and so I didn't have a lot of rent costs and so on. And I felt very good about that kind of work. So I figured, well, let's do it again. And so I've been doing now for 8 years, actually, A Year for the Animals, doing full-time animal rights activism. And last year I became more active also in the climate movement, especially with Extinction Rebellion. An organization started in Britain, but it has spread to many countries today. So then I wanted to ask my supporters if I can include climate justice work, which I did, and which got a positive feedback on that. So now I call my project A Year for the Animals and the Earth to include. So now I work about half time on animal rights and half time on climate justice issues. Well, and actually this morning I started working on a new lecture that I will have on an animal rights conference in Copenhagen and the International Animal Rights Conference in Luxembourg, which will be in September. And the theme of that lecture is how you can combine the animal rights struggle with the climate justice struggle and how these movements can work together. So that's what I'm doing right now.
And the climate crisis is being, accelerated by the animal agriculture. So it's right in there.
Exactly. Yeah, of course, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about. And I feel now being active in the climate justice movement, I feel that part is not being talked about enough. We have done actions on fossil fuels, of course, the oil that comes into the harbor. I'm actually going on a trial later this month for a blockade we did at the harbor in Sweden where half of the oil comes in, and also done actions on the airplanes. etc. But we have done very little on the animal agriculture's contribution to the climate crisis. So that's what I want to do more also.
Yeah, and it's really, I believe it's really shameful when governments and organizations talk about, doing something for climate change, and then they close the book on animal agriculture. They want to put masks on cows. They want to teach them, potty train them. They want to talk about fossil fuels. They want to talk about everything, but the major problem that causes climate change, animal agriculture.
Exactly, yeah. And it seems like when you talk about cars, for instance, everyone knows that cars, if they're run on gasoline, that they're bad for the climate. But the food, it seems to be more sensitive to talk about from our politicians' point of view. Yeah.
Oh, well, because meat and dairy contribute a lot of money to them, and they don't want to stop that flow of the money, basically. So, which is, again, shameful, because they should be more concerned with the people that they're supposed to serve than the big companies that give them money.
Exactly, and probably also because the animal farmers have a very strong lobby. That's the case in Sweden, at least. They are really strong, and they really try to push the politicians to just continue with things like they are now, unfortunately. So we have to be even stronger, of course, in our actions.
And they talk about, recycle, change out the bulbs. How about animal agriculture? How about, instead of spending all this money to try to do all these different things that are not going to work, why not help fund the animal agriculture individuals to transform to a different kind of business, to farm plants, to do something that actually would help not only the climate and the animals, but human health.
Exactly, and we do have the tools already to do that transition, right? And that's something we talk about in the Plant-Based Treaty, which is a campaign within the SAVE movement that we try to work on a lot globally today. And many of my colleagues in other countries are really working to this to try to get cities and states and countries and individuals to do this transition that we really need to a plant-based food system. I'm rather hopeful, even though we need more successes. I'm quite hopeful that this can work, especially even if we have the tools already to do this transition with new technologies. I think maybe our chances are much bigger. If it can become much cheaper with plant-based food and more efficient, maybe the industry will also be a part of the transition. I hope so.
Right here, we have one of those organizations, Transformation, to help farmers who have animals get out of that business. And then people talk about argument that there'll be people who lose their jobs. Yes, but this transformation can create new jobs that are more beneficial for the community and for the planet, that would be more worthwhile.
Very true, but I do understand some farmers, they might have invested millions in their machines and buildings that are suited for animals. So I think our states, our politicians have to help them to with financial aid so they can make that transition, because it's not only the farmers that have this need to do this. We all need to be a part of the transition. So why not help with our common money, with tax money for that? I think that would be reasonable to do that.
Well, they're already subsidizing, so they could just change that subsidy to do what you just said, help them
exactly.
out. and get them out of that business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So tell me, so you've done live rescues. I'm sure that it is a somber event when that happens because you're going in, you don't know what's happening, what, you know, whether you're going to wind up in jail or whether you're going to be have a successful rescue or not. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's something special and also a bit scary because you don't know if you're going to run into any farmers or other persons. We do it at night to be able to have this greater chance of actually rescuing animals. The first one we did in 2015, we actually came to a pig farm. And right before we went inside, we heard someone talking inside, and this was in the middle of the night. So that was pretty scary. But then, fortunately, we had a plan B, so we went to a place nearby with another farm where we could save the animals. And yeah, in all the rescues, maybe I've been a part of maybe 8 or 9 rescues now. But we have been fortunate not to have any confrontation. We haven't met any farmers. We went once to a fish farm, and there it was very close because we saw a car, and it was like active. It was on somehow. We heard the noises from a car. So then we thought, oh, we have to wait, but it just kept going, and to this day it's a mystery. We don't know because we didn't see any people, but we waited so long. But finally we said, oh, we have to go now before the light comes up, and so we did. But later we heard that we were like, when we had left, it was like 5 minutes until someone came to that very farm. So that was pretty close. But all the times we have been able to rescue the animals and drive them to their new homes where they will be taken care of. And we know that there's a great risk of getting some fines or prison time because we call the police afterward. That has been our strategy, to be as open as we can and to defend our right to rescue in court, although it's very unlikely that they will free us, of course. But we think it's worth it to make a stand for the animals and take whatever punishment that the state will give us.
I commend anyone who does live animal rescue. And like you said, I'm sure that it's very nerve-wracking and, you know, you don't know what's happening. But after, you know, when you do rescue the animals and get them to a safe haven, I'm sure that it's very satisfying to know that at least this animal or that animal that you have saved gets to have a life that they all should have.
Yeah, very much so. I do remember, especially the pigs. They might be a few weeks old when we got them. They had been living, of course, inside their whole life on concrete floors. They didn't know anything else. But when they came out, there were 2 of them we rescued. Straight away, they went out and, you know, with their noses down in the dirt. And some farmers and others say, oh, they don't know anything else. But, you know, they have their urges like everyone does. And for them, it's their curiousness. They want to dig, they want to go out. And you can really see them coming alive and being in nature. That was something else. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some of those that chickens and pigs and cows that have seen the outside for the first time and their response to it. And like I said, I commend every animal rescuer that does this because it takes a lot of courage. And I know that it's done with a lot of compassion and love for these poor animals who would otherwise end up on somebody's plate.
Yeah. And of course, doing such an action, it takes quite a lot of time and energy to plan and do. And of course, it's for the individuals that we save. But my hope is that it will have a greater impact when they see this transition. Of course, we video film it and we write about it and so on. But seeing this transition from a concrete floor inside 24/7 to them being outside and enjoying the sun on their faces. I hope that does something to people, and also when the animals come to their new home, when they're being taken care of and loved, and we can show that they can create this connection to animals that really feel care for them. I really do think that can have an impact on people and saying, I don't want to eat these individuals anymore. And why do we do this in the factory farms? I have had that reactions from quite many, and hopefully many that I haven't heard of, that have also had this reaction when I've been out. And there was a small documentary made on our first free animal rescues as well that has been shown a bit. And so I hope by telling these stories about these animals that can have a wider impact than just the rescues themselves.
Well, Martin, thank you for being on the show. I surely appreciate it. I appreciate what you do. And I will have information to your web pages so that people can take a look and check out what you're doing. And again, thank you so much for being who you are.
Thank you, Nancy, for doing this. It's wonderful that you talk to different people about their vegan journey. I really appreciate it, and all you viewers who also are passionate about animal rights. Together, we can make a difference. That's my firm belief. So, thank you.
I believe it too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Vegan Pulse, where we have the privilege of sharing stories from all over the globe of compassionate individuals and their efforts to move forward the vegan movement. We hope these stories inspire and empower you to embrace a vegan lifestyle and join the movement towards a more compassionate and sustainable world. Remember, your choices matter, and together we can pulse the vegan movement forward. Keep spreading compassion, advocating for change, and making a positive impact in your own unique way. Stay tuned for more stories. And if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.